helping get it set up. I will talk to Buzzy next time. Make sure I have it installed on my computer so I can actually lead the meeting, or be the organizer for it. This is Sarah. Let's go ahead and get started. Maybe with a roll call first. This is Sarah at Hood River County Library.
Jenny from NISTA.
Sarah, this is you. Would you like me to just go through who I have first and then from there?
Okay. Oh, I guess we have it on the okay.
So ToMeeting has a list, yeah. But
why don't you handle it? Yeah, how you?
Okay, I can do that.
Think would be best. Okay.
This is who I have, and you can fill in if I haven't got you or I don't have you identified. I have Perry, Christina Trinnell, Beth Longwell, David Sales, Heather, and I'm guessing this is Heather Estrada, but I'm not positive. Is that correct?
Oh, what's Heather?
I'm Katie from Columbia Gorge. I just got in.
Right, I haven't got to you quite yet, Katie. I'll come back.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Can you hear me, Dia?
Yes. I'm assuming this is Heather Estrada. If that's not correct, somebody will have to let me know. Then I also have Jenny Simpson, Lori O'Connor, Sarah Samuels, Catherine Wick, Barbara Telfer, Katie Wallace, and Carmen at Is there anybody else that I missed?
Okay.
I'm gonna mute.
Valerie from Ontario.
I'm going to mute everyone. So if you need to talk, you unmute yourselves. But we are getting some background noise.
Yeah. Oh,
Okay,
that's better.
This is Valerie from Ontario.
Is there anyone else that I missed? Is there anyone else that I missed? Oh, I see Molly has joined us.
Did you get that Valerie had joined us? Valerie Gardner?
I did. Yes, I tried to say something. I think I had hit the mute button, but yes, I heard Valerie also. Okay, thank you. Okay, that's who I have.
Did I mute Sarah too? I don't see that she is listed. I'm afraid I muted Sarah as well. We don't hear her. There's no mute icon next to her name, though. Are you still with us, Sarah?
I think that's because she's on the phone, maybe?
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to unmute everybody and see if we can hear Sarah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
We can now.
I can't. How funny. Can you unmute me?
No, I don't seem to have a control over people that have called in by phone.
Okay. Cannot everyone hear me? Is that the issue?
Lori, I hear you now.
Okay, you do hear me now. Okay.
I hear you. This is Catherine in Pendleton.
Okay, great. Let's see. Beth, do you hear me?
Yes. This is David. We can hear you.
Yeah, David, you hear me? Okay, good. I think it's under control. Hopefully did people get a chance to look over the minutes from December? Or do we want to take a few minutes to do this now? It's attached on the Sage Wiki, or it's on the Sage Wiki, and I've attached it to a previous email. Do I need to send it out again, or does everybody have it?
I have it.
Okay. Did anyone notice anything that needs to be changed?
I just noticed under the OPAC images we didn't have the vendor name. You might want to fill that in, but.
Okay. Oh, I see. Right. Beth, what is the vendor that...
Yes, if you could give us vendor name for the images. I didn't catch that at the December meeting, and I will put them into the draft minutes.
Okay, so it's Baker Taylor Content Cafe.
So that sort of broke up. So I'll get an email from you, and then I'll fill it in so I don't have anything to it. Okay?
I can type it in the chat.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Someone is typing away, and that's all I hear.
Yeah. And we're back to having a lot of background noise too.
I was just going to suggest anybody who's online, if you would mute yourself until you need to speak, it would really be helpful to everyone else.
Okay. Perry, thanks for putting up the minutes.
To mute yourself, in case anyone doesn't know it, there's a little microphone next to your name, and if you click on that, that'll mute your microphone.
Okay.
Or actually, there's a little toolbar too that you can do it on. That's just below the red arrow.
I'm thinking that must only be if you have a microphone, which I don't. I'm not seeing those options. So, but
it's because you're on the phone.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Were there any other comments on the minutes?
This is Lori, and I have to admit that my minutes were a little confused. We had our larger roundtable meeting and then the actual cataloging committee meeting. And I did keep separate minutes, but sometimes I had arrows back and forth between the two meetings. So I could have overlooked something in the official cataloging committee meeting. Stand me as corrected if you need to. I certainly could have made some mistakes on the content of that meeting. I did get a couple of emails about people who had attended, and I haven't heard their names, and I have corrected those.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, Lori. Would anyone like to make a motion to accept the minutes?
This is
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes with the noted change.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Is anyone opposed? Okay. We'll accept them as corrected with the vendor for the images. Okay. All right. So now, Beth and David, I'm hoping you can update us on a couple of these pieces of business from this last meeting, the survey and the training, things that we talked about in December, and kind of just let us know how those are going and if you need what you need from the committee or anything else that has to do with them.
Okay, the survey has been posted, and a print copy was sent out to all the libraries. I heard back from some of the libraries that had printed them out and made them available for their patrons. And I'll defer to David for any results that he's received so far.
I actually have not received any results so far, which I guess those would come through, most of those would come through the online form. And it's simply that I haven't yet checked on that. So when did that go out? That was fairly recently, right?
It was fairly recently.
Okay.
Last week, sometime at the beginning of last week. I've had some people ask how long we're going to keep the survey up. When we had discussed it before, the survey ended up not getting out there as quickly as we had hoped because of the formal approval process. And so anyway, I've told folks that we're going to keep it up until the end of February, figuring that gave adequate time to garner enough responses to be.
Okay. So I think we'll have a better idea of results at the next meeting of the committee. And I can send something out on the listserv when we get that together. So as for the training update, we are currently in week 4 of the 7-week Nebraska training. The 2015 updated to include RDA Fields version of the course. There are 12 students who are participating. We have had some interest from an additional 5 or 6 people, so it looks like I'm going to be adding a second section of the class, which is beginning this week. So, so far I have to say that I've been very pleased with the progress that the participants are making, and feeling very enthusiastic about their ability to work with MARC records at the completion of this. So if there are any particular questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them.
David, I just have a question as to how did we advertise this?
This was advertised directly. Since the records on who had and who had not done this training previously were a little confused, I thought the best thing to do would be to send out an email directly to those individuals and or libraries that were shown to be lacking the Nebraska training. Let's see here. So that email announcing the commencement of the course initially went out to some 41 individuals and or library districts. The majority of them gave back no response, including virtually all of the school districts in our consortium, with the exception of Duffer and Sherman, where the librarians there said that they would participate in this training course. Several people wrote back to say that no, they had in fact already completed the training at an earlier date, and I updated the spreadsheet of cataloging contacts and training levels to reflect that information. So does that answer your question? Can she hear me?
David, this is Sarah. I have just a couple questions. Wondering if you're adding a second session, and it sounds like you have 4 to 5 students for that. It sounds like the other class, I mean, you really actually have quite a few students, but for the second session, if you would be willing to advertise to the general SAGE list in case there are people who didn't see the first round and didn't kind of hear about it through the grapevine who might want to take the course, or is that are you worried about being overwhelmed?
No, I'm not worried about being overwhelmed. I'm maybe a little worried about the discrepancies between the Nebraska course and local cataloging rules. I mean, I am, for instance, despite the fact that I have been reiterating this from the beginning of the course, that the assignments should be completed using the special characters and formatting of Evergreen, I still see the majority of the students are using the special character set given in the Nebraska course and not ours, for instance, or some other things like that. So I don't know whether I want to necessarily open this up to anybody in the entire consortium until maybe a little further down the road. Another thing to consider with that is, what was I going to say here? I've lost my train of thought. Oh, dang it. What was I going to say?
Well, maybe I could ask you my other question, and then if you remember what you were going to say, you just add that in too. I'm wondering if you have a sense for if the people who are taking the class tend to be the primary catalogers at their library, or actually doing a fair amount of cataloging, or is it does that vary? Do you know?
My general sense is yes, they're either primary or a few of them the secondary catalogers for their institutions.
Okay.
Oh, that was what I was going to say. Was that with regard to the Nebraska training course, I had invited staff at one district to receive the training. I was in touch with their manager. She was of the opinion that the Nebraska course was itself too advanced for her staff to be able to complete successfully, which is, I found, somewhat less than reassuring. But there is the problem there that even though this course is intended to be an introductory level course, it's also intended for people who are going to be working at least a Tier 2 permission level under the new dispensation. And I am not sure that the majority of members in the consortium either need or want that level of access. Well, some of the larger districts, obviously, present company accepted, one might say, but I think many of these smaller libraries would rather, I think, work just doing match and attach and correspond with mentors or with myself when they have special needs.
This is Sarah, and that sounds fine to me. It makes sense. Just I guess the issue is that the libraries understand that, and as we change to permissions-based cataloging that reflect their training, that they're prepared for that. I guess that they know.
I have been very forthright about that in all of my communications.
Great.
That this Nebraska training course or some version thereof will be requisite for access to bibliographic records in future. including, I believe, Z3950 import and CAT Express.
Okay, great. That's just the piece. Does anyone else have questions about the training or the survey?
Yes, this is Lori, and I didn't hear how many people are taking the training, David?
12 people are currently taking the training, Lori, and an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, an additional 7 have expressed interest. Some of whom had been in the initial round of invitations, but had not actually declared their interest until the course was already underway. So rather than try to have them catch up, that was why the second session was created. So from those folks, I'm expecting shortly to receive their second assignment, Barbara.
So what's the process if someone does not obtain the SAGE training and certification required? Do you have a process to?
The process is that eventually, and I'm with Lori in saying hopefully, they will be locked out from the ability to import, edit, or delete bibliographic records in Evergreen.
Will they still be able to attach items?
Of course.
Okay.
And this is Lori, and I think another part of Perry's question might be related to, we do have some alternative ways to obtain the cataloging permissions, and that's demonstration of skill or other training. So that's
sure.
And then that would be easy to do, and I'm sure Perry and Beth could review it.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I mean, as somebody with an MLS, this Nebraska course is essentially identical to the cataloging training I previously received. And so for people who've done, like I said, the equivalent of this course or can demonstrate their knowledge, we wouldn't necessarily require them to retake it. That said, I have heard from at least one person who is interested in retaking the Nebraska course simply as a refresher.
And this is Lori. I don't think that that's an extraordinary effort. Really, I mean, that comes to about 14, 16 hours of training, and we haven't offered anything in 2 or 3 years. I had encouraged actually kind of a broader participation, but on David's part, that would become overwhelming if he's dealing with 40 students.
Well, it would be nice to break it up into smaller pieces. And I think one thing that has not been overwhelming exactly, but has presented certain logistical challenges, is trying to hold chat sessions for Q&A 3 times a week. And to work around other people's availability. So again, I think these are issues where, as we move forward with developing a new staff site, we'll be able to address them so that we can do this in a way that's asynchronous and more tailored to our local cataloging rules than the Nebraska material is on occasion.
I have a kind of, it's somewhat related, but not so, not very closely related question, but that it has come up a little bit. Wondering what the training is for people to be able to match and attach. It sounds like there's initial training as library sign-on with Evergreen, how to use Evergreen.
There is a Jing video and a written description of the process on the current staff training wiki with links to the appropriate sections of the Indiana and Sitka software manuals. So as far as that goes, I personally would consider supervised practice in carrying out the steps of that task to amount to sufficient training.
That makes sense to me.
We also do that training when we go out to sites.
Yeah, okay. That was kind of my impression, but I guess.
Yeah, so far I've not seen that people are struggling to attach their local holdings to records in the catalog. Well, I mean, there are, many libraries that are still using the temp barcodes, Cove and a few others.
That has to do with kind of their level and whether they're automated.
Right, it has to do with whether they're fully automated yet. But yeah, again, I think that's not where I'm seeing a weakness. It's mostly again, bibliographic records and also authority control to an extent.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for getting going with the training, David.
As far as a training update goes, I should add that shortly, I'm thinking in March or thereabouts, so after the conclusion of the current section and probably close to the conclusion of the second one, or at least after midway through it, I am intending to do to make use of GoToMeeting to hold some webinars for both the people who are in or have finished the Nebraska course, as well as some of the other catalogers in the consortium, to talk about some of these more advanced topics, authority control being one of them, cataloging for audio-visual records being one of them. I'm thinking partly of the recent discussion we had surrounding mixed media materials, books with attached DVDs, or are they DVDs with attached books, and so on and so forth. I'm still kind of drawing up the agenda for some of that. So more on that as I sort of gel my ideas on it.
Okay. I want to thank you, too, for the tip of the week. The cataloging tips have been great, I think. Just a nice scope, digestible and helpful. So from my point of view, I appreciate them. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Okay, so Beth, could you talk a little bit about about permissions implementation and how that's going, and if you need anything from us regarding that?
The implementation has started. It got slowed down a bit when we had server issues and we were taken away to work on other projects, but we're close to having that server back up again and the workarounds eliminated. So we'll be able to dive back into it and implement the permission structure at more libraries. So work is underway.
Great. Have there been any particular issues with that, or so far?
Not so far. So far it's gone very smoothly.
Great.
And this is David jumping in here. Is one thing that I do and have been anticipating along the way here is when this permission takes effect, is that some individuals or some libraries will suddenly realize, oh no, wait, I do need this permission, and therefore I guess I do need this training. And if they need it, all they have to do is to ask, and I shall provide.
That's very, very nice of you to be flexible about it. It would be nice if we can maintain a really supportive approach through the whole thing as much as possible. So I think that's great, and you can refer to mentors too if you need backup, or just ask the committee for help in how to handle it if it gets to be a really big task. But I do really appreciate you being kind of supporting libraries through the transition.
This is Perry. Beth, do you have a first library or first two libraries or so that are going to be implementing the permissions?
We already have two libraries that are fully implemented on it, and more that are kind of partway there. So do you need, CGCC is one of them, Hood River is another.
Okay.
This is Lori, and I'd like to kind of see a list as this progress goes on. I don't know, is anybody restricted?
Some are, yes. Do you want me to give that list? I don't know, do you want me to share it with the mentors?
I think that would be a good place to start. Okay. The thing, my question, Beth, and as I emailed you and David and several other people last week, I'm a little bit, Yale has been allowed to bring in records, and they, it's really creating a lot of duplicates. And there are others that are also bringing in false duplicate records still. And I thought that 3 years into this policy, certainly when a new person comes in and there's nobody qualified to do that kind of work, I certainly would have thought that would have been a restriction at that point, and that library could only match and attach. In the case of Vail, they would have found those records if they would have searched a little harder. And as a mentor and as a member of the mentor group, we've always extended ourselves to help any library. This is not a matter of trying to restrict libraries from getting their records up. It's just it's a fact that a lot of us spend too much time cleaning up, and it feels like we're going backwards on that. So why wasn't Vail restricted at that point? I don't understand that.
Well, what do you mean? If this permissions procedure is in its infant stages, and so obviously we've done training, there didn't seem to be an issue with matching and attaching. I was waiting to see if they were going to, in fact, take the class, and that does not seem to be the case. So, I think there's some specifics in this situation with this library that we didn't anticipate that they were going to need to be restricted from the get-go.
Well, if I can also add something to that. In looking at the list of records from Vail that are in need of work, it appears to me, I was working on the number 3 spreadsheet you gave me, and at least in that one, the majority of those appear to be not duplicate records imported, but records created from scratch by an untrained individual, and therefore likely precede even the Evergreen Union catalog.
Well, they don't precede the Evergreen Union catalog, but they do precede the current staff at Vail. So, but the fact that you are seeing duplicates, Laura, you saw duplicates, Baker saw duplicates, brought to the attention we need to go back out and figure out what they're doing incorrectly when they're searching to bring those in. And so that site visit is going to be this week.
I have the idea that they may be scanning the UPC and not the ISBN on the cover.
And I wonder if they have their catalog narrowed down to themselves rather than Sage
Sure.
when they're doing cataloging.
But after, having spoken extensively with Lori here last week, I think she does raise a valid point that the larger library districts, such as, for instance, Baker County, have a chain of command in place to oversee the process of record importation and editing. It's the very small, single library districts, single solo librarians in the library that that perhaps need that need training, and that also, in the meantime, may need to be more greatly restricted than they have been until now.
And one more thing that the committee needs to think about that is kind of an area of vulnerability with the permissions process that we are implementing is that when there is turnover in one of the SAGE member libraries, we need to be informed about that somehow, so that the permission logins that are given aren't just passed on to the next person. I mean, they can easily do that. If it's somebody's name, they could just give them the credential, and it would take us a while to figure that out.
Yes, I don't think we are. I don't know. I guess maybe Beth and Brent have a strategy for that. But as far as I know, as a committee, we don't at this point.
Yeah, we are relying, and this is something maybe that we can bring up at the council meeting, is that just informing us when new staff come on board that are going to be cataloging, so that we can give them the support and training that they need, and also set up their login accordingly.
Yeah, that sounds good.
As far as I know, up to now, Beth, you're probably the main person that knows when there's a change of staff. You did say you'd been out to Vail?
Yes, we have been out to Vail, and a couple times, and done training, and seemed like things were going fine, which kind of concerned me when issues started popping up again. So I figure, well, we'll do a return visit and see what changed, whether she's having somebody else do the work, and they haven't received adequate training. So the exploratory mission, but most of the time people, I'll find out about it because they want to add a new staff member to the listserv. But yeah, sites don't always tell me about new staff, and then I'm kind of broadsided. It's like, oh, I didn't know that change had been made. I eventually find out about it, but maybe not as quick as I would like to.
But even if the person that you had visited, if she's doing the records, what do you consider adequate training? And I just don't feel like at this point, while we have a cataloging specialist, frankly, I think that this needs to be run by our cataloging specialist, and the training would rest on him. The permissions of any new staff person until they prove they're capable should be no importation of records, and it would save us a lot of headaches. I just don't understand why they had permission to import records. I think a couple of hours of training is just not adequate in a busy little library where they're multitasking. So I don't understand how we're going to we have a cataloging policy. It took months to get it passed. I think we edited, we made it even more friendly and more user-friendly, and we still have basically no implementation 3 years into it. And I understand you've been announcing that it would be implemented several months ago, and there would be some restrictions. I can't think of a better example than a small library like Vail with somebody with no training and no background in cataloging. I can't think of a better example to start using this policy on. And I don't understand.
We've been through this, and it's going to happen. So,
Lori, are you suggesting that Vail be moved up the permissions implementation schedule?
No, suggesting that it be moved down, Terry.
No, he mean
like be made a priority.
Prioritized. Is that what you're? Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
And it is prioritized, and I will evaluate. When she first came on board, I went and trained and did training on matching and attachment, but I also gave her the link to the Nebraska training, knowing that David was coming on board, and she has not taken the initiative to complete the training.
For the record, Vail Public Library, their main account was among the list of library contact emails that I sent notice to that the training would be beginning in January. I received no response from them. They neither expressed an interest in participating, nor did they decline. So I'm not 100% sure if that is because the contact information we have for them is out of date, if it is because they do not check their email on a regular basis, or who knows what. I mean, I suppose I could make the time in my duties to contact by phone every member of the consortium when I have news or an announcement to transmit. But at a certain level, this does, I think, rest on the individual members to seek out and to follow up on the what they need to do.
In the case of Vail, they may have thought they were trained because, as Beth said, she went there to train them, and they might think they know how to run the barcoder, they know how to pick up a book, and by golly, they're going to put those things out on circulation. And this has been going on for a long time. I just think that automatic policy, just look at the policy. Anyone without either demonstrating an ability, any library that does not demonstrate an ability,
Lori,
take the training, they're restricted to match and attach, and it would save us all so much cleanup. And I don't understand what the problem is. Everyone acts as an ogre's point of view, and it's not. I don't see why a little library like Vail should take 20 hours to train for basic cataloging. Honestly, not right at the get-go. I want to help them. I don't want them to be confused by this. I don't want them to be struggling with these items. I want to help. A lot of people are ready to help. I just don't think they should have those permissions, and I think that's totally professional and even high.
Well, as somebody who is currently engaged in overlaying all of the many records that Vail has uploaded, yes, I think that there should be what should we call it here, a negative presumption in cataloging permissions, which is to say that, as you said, unless they are able to positively demonstrate knowledge and ability at working with MARC records, they should not be granted access to them.
That is our policy. It just is not being implemented, and it's really getting old.
Lori, I think you know you're correct in saying that this is our policy. We are in the process of rolling out that policy, and rather than placing blame on Beth or whomever that it's not done in this case already, let's just say that we want to move them up the prioritization schedule to get the permissions enforced in their case.
Is that possible, Beth? Can we?
Yeah, it's going to be done.
We can restrict
tomorrow.
Vail. Okay, thank you. And then, do we need more? Do we need to talk about how we can support those? I mean, talk about say a system for getting small libraries that do not have permission for importing or creating records, that they can get the records when they need them. I mean, I know we generally say that we can use your mentors for that. Is that adequate, or do we need a more kind of a more robust method to get them records?
I think that's something we can work on over time. I think while David is help us, I think he will probably assume most of that load unless it becomes burdensome, and I'll try he'll let us know when that happens.
So far, what I've received a few inquiries here and there. Not generally. I have a few for original cataloging, but mostly just sort of for sort of advice or details and things like that. So I think also, in with the permissions and all of that, is that it is, I think, kind of having to take a little bit of a having to offer a carrot, one might say, as well as a stick here. And so while the mentor system, I think, is a good one, and it will meet the needs of smaller libraries that don't have the time or ability to get more deeply into training, I think it needs to be made clear from the outset that mentor assistance, especially assistance with original cataloging, is something that may need to take place on the mentor's schedule and not necessarily on the schedule of this library. I mean, I'm thinking, of some of the folks here like Dia and Lori who have their own jobs at their own libraries, and I think we need to recognize that work comes first.
Thank you, David.
I too, this is Christina. I too, though, I think there's a second part of the issue that maybe we're missing, and that's, yes, I agree with Lori. Yes, when new libraries come on or new staff come on, there should be a kind of a stopgap in the permissions so that damage isn't done. But say, like in the case of Vail, she's only been cataloging for 2-3 months, but her predecessor left a huge list of horrific records that Lori and I have been griping about for years, right? And so what is the process? I mean, most of their library is on terribly incomplete records. I would say 95% of their library is not searchable records. So
I pulled a list, Christina, of all of the records that they had created, and David and I are going through them.
Okay.
And
that was kind of my question: is when there is an issue, should we consider a process of how to fix the problem? Like whose responsibility is that? And then do we dump that on the new person and say, okay, catch up quick, you have all these things to fix? Or is there a process?
I consider it my responsibility as the cataloging specialist to do the cleanup in these matters. And I've just gotten started on it here, but so far I think these things have been going pretty well. We had an earlier project cleaning up the large print bib records that had errors in them, and that went smoothly and fairly quickly here. I'm thinking that I will probably be able to manage to either correct or overlay these records we've identified from Vail by the end of the month.
Yeah, maybe sooner.
That's great.
And that's wonderful, but once again, I would like to point out, I'm willing to bet you that 90% of the new duplicates could have been attached to an existing record. And that's great that you can get it done that fast, but I would like to evolve into a library system where we have a better operating procedure.
And I thought, yeah, I mean, that's the direction we're wanting to go.
So as far as implementing the permissions, it might be helpful to come up with prioritization list of implementing them first in the most at-risk libraries? Could we come up with that kind of schedule? Like, as David had mentioned, the bigger libraries probably aren't as much of a risk because we do have procedures, tend to have procedures in place. Would it be logical to focus on the smaller libraries for implementation?
I can do that.
Mm-hmm. Would it be reasonable also that if there are particular libraries that that any of us have concerns about because of records we see, that we tell Beth about that? I mean, we can talk to the whole group, or we can just tell Beth and David and kind of so that they have that information as they're deciding the prioritization.
That would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
I like both those ideas.
And I'll add also, it just seems to me just important to reiterate, though, that this really is focusing on a quality control issue, and that the permission system is not, shall not, and never was intended to be a punitive measure against any member library in the consortium.
Thank you.
That's a good point. Just protecting the shared database. Okay, great. Thank you for that discussion. Can we move on to parts? There's some, I know there's been ongoing discussion about this. I think libraries are using parts more. I've noticed more and more, but it sounds like we could maybe discuss and determine some standardization of how we are going to name parts and even, create them. Well, actually, maybe I should open it up first for if people have comments, issues on progress, things that they've encountered, any questions, and then we could go from there. So does anyone have any comments about parts to start, or questions, things you want to focus on?
This is Lori, and the only work that I've done with parts, what I like is when I find a pre-existing record with the parts listed, and I like over-definition rather than under-definition in the terminology. Mm-hmm. I think, Sarah, I attached to several of your records where you had named not only discs, I think like disc 1, and then it would say which episodes that contained. Because some publishers do actually sell these items broken down in different ways. They may have the same ISBN. Could be an easy thing to attach to, and they have a different parts labeling possible to happen there. So my advice is just, the simplest way is if there's already an existing parts label, and it's logical and it works for you, certainly use it. And I don't know if we need to have a list of parts as we did for our 999 terminology. That might unify our entries so that it's consistent. Other suggestions? I don't know.
I would like to see us come up with maybe a list of terminology that we would like used. Otherwise, I think we might end up with all kinds of things. Just some examples that people could go on.
Well, I was going to say in answer to that, and this may sound like somewhat of a heretical idea here, but I am really more concerned that people simply use consistent terminology in naming all the parts of a single record, rather than that the formatting and names of parts be consistent from one record to another. I mean, we are dealing with multiple media types here. I am finding myself using parts to assist in the process of serial monograph conversion, for instance. And so Yeah, basically, I think while it is good to add the disc count in addition to just simply saying part 1 or part 2 or so forth, that I don't know that there exists a standardized terminology for this, and that it's mainly, I think, yeah, it is going to be building off of each other's work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I just think if we're going to ask people to start using parts, we could maybe give them some examples, like a list of, for audiobooks, here's one way to do it. And that way the cataloger that, is really new to it and is unsure can say, oh, I can just do it this way, and that's okay. Instead of trying to come up with
another possibility where I see on the agenda here we have permissions. Another possibility is that parts management could be defined as a species of authority control and therefore require a level 1 permission to implement, in which case when the cataloger comes along he will already find a list of part names for him to choose among in the record rather than having to create them. The flip side is that, of course, throws this responsibility on to mentors rather than allowing this to be done by other folks as needed.
I don't think we have enough Cat 1 people to have it at the Cat 1 permission level.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
It seems to me it's a part of matching and attaching that ideally everyone does as their and it's as we've encountered, it's sometimes hard to anticipate whether other libraries are going to use parts when you are not.
Yeah.
So you import the record and set it up, but then don't necessarily see that there's going to be a need for parts or what parts they would want to use. Are they going to break up their box set into discs 1, 2, and 3, and then a second part that's discs 4 and 5, or 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 5, or 1, 2, all individual. Different libraries have different ways. So
that I find is largely dictated by manufacturer packaging, at least in the case of DVD box sets. So it will vary from title to title.
Well, it also varies with what the libraries have available, as if they're not using the vendor provided packaging and they're using
their own cases. Who knows? Yeah.
Correct, right. I would love to see a standards document put out. Are the terms going to be spelled out? Are we going to capitalize the first letter? Like, is it going to be volume, or is it going to be V.1? Is it going to be VOL.1? I would love to see a standards document produced about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And situations will differ, but yeah, no, I think it's a good idea.
This is Sarah, and personally, after creating quite a few parts now, I do like a descriptive part name. So rather than just part 1, part 2, part 3, to have part 1 is discs 1 through 13, or part 1 has a specific title, if there's episodes or if there's a volume title for it. Really, I guess we don't want paragraph-long parts names, but I don't see a big drawback to having it be fairly descriptive. It is what people will see when they go place a hold on the item and they're choosing which part. It needs to give them enough information that they know they know what it is.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think that we will be taking that direction.
Okay, great. Just kind of a very specific point that I would love to talk about a little bit right now is the situation where we have say a DVD, the kind of the all discs situation. Do people have a preference? We could call that box set, or people have kind of expressed interest in that in the past, but I'm wondering if maybe an all discs, or if there's another phrase that that patrons could get used to seeing and knowing that means the entire set, does that make sense? That's one piece I would love to standardize.
Complete set, I think.
Complete set.
Yeah, I like that. That the one record that you and I were dealing with, Sarah, I would have typed complete set, but I did box set because that's what you already had in there.
I know, and I've used box set some now too, but every time I do it, I'm not sure it's as clear, it's optimally clear. So I would go back, but maybe it is. I guess I just want everyone's feedback on that.
Sounds fine. On a related note, since Dia was thoughtful enough to track down directions on adding parts to an existing item, and in working with those, it does appear to me that you can then also replace part names by creating a new part name and then repeating the process of adding a part name and simply using the new one. You can even go back and delete the older part names in the record, I believe. So
you can edit an existing part name by clicking on it. It's not, or double clicking on it, I think. I can't, it's not especially clear as you're looking looking at the Manage Parts screen, but is that what you're talking about, or is one of the things you're talking about?
Yeah, you can line
you can just change it.
You said you can line edit it. You don't have to get rid of the old one and then put the new one in. You can just change it like you would a barcode. Wow.
Double click on it, and it brings up a screen that you can edit the name of the part.
I didn't know that worked the same way as the call numbers did. That's good to know, Dia. Thank you. Sorry, I can't tell voices apart.
Yeah, that was Sarah.
That's okay.
Okay. Well,
and I'm looking forward to reading Dia's information about adding a part to existing items, because I think I did that once, but now I haven't been able to find it lately. So
it's on the staff.
And then, do we want to? Are we agreed that we can want to extend permissions for, say, level 1 catalogers to add parts or assign other libraries items to parts, or a different level of cataloging, or are we not agreed on that? Do people have?
You're talking about conceptual access to other people's items for the assignment of parts.
Okay.
So, and what level that should be at. I mean, I've given it to individuals, but it would be good for me to know what level you think that is appropriate at, so that I can put it in as a default.
Okay.
I'm almost thinking Cat 2, but...
Well, I think we have to clarify here between creating part names to be used by other people when they attach items.
We're talking about cleanup.
Cleanup, or okay, so we're talking about reassigning then.
Well,
yeah,
or assigning that
hasn't had it previously. Yeah, that should be at least a Cat 2. And
anybody have any concerns about it being at a Cat 2 level?
This is Catherine
No.
here in Pendleton. I don't have a concern about being at the Cat 2 level. What I'm concerned with is someone understanding a library that only has a single case and a double case, and then they break it into parts for 6 disks, say, and then would you have someone else that has a case that holds them all go in and edit what you've put in for parts?
Well, I think as we have discussed on several previous occasions, this is why, as a matter of policy, a part name reading complete set needs to be used by libraries who elect to circulate all disks together. So, and obviously different libraries may choose to break up a set into different amounts. One, if it's a 6-disc set, one library may go 3 and 3, and one library may circulate each of the 6 disks individually. And so that's kind of the problem here in determining the level of access, is that we need to give each library the freedom to do as they see fit in that regard, with the understanding that that is their own material and that they should not be assigning or changing the part names of material that other libraries choose to circulate without being so instructed.
Mm-hmm. So I think the issue is when we go into a record to add an item and see that there are other libraries that libraries are circulating parts, but those parts have not been recorded in the record. They're not specified yet. Can we just make that change while we're in there and assign those, especially if we can tell, most libraries do a good job in, I don't know about most, but often it's clear from the call number what the parts are. Would it be helpful if we just went ahead and sometimes I might be creating and naming parts, or at the very least if we're adding items in parts to a record and others already exist there that don't seem to be broken up into parts, can we assign them to one that's called complete set?
So did you just see Perry change those? That was you, Perry, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
the
that's
box
happening,
set to
right.
complete set, that was pretty easy.
It was.
Everybody looking at the example, and it's a great example. So, okay, so that was, you were able to do that, Perry. So the permissions are set like that right now, or?
Yeah.
However, all I did was edit the parts.
Yeah.
Those were already assigned on those items for other libraries.
Okay.
So you would have to have permission to edit, to add a part and to be able to edit an item belonging to another library.
Right. I guess that's right. If the complete sets had not been assigned to a part yet, do we want and Baker County goes in there assigning they're adding the item as 2 parts. You create the parts. Should they be able to assign Hermiston's and Sherman counties to a part called complete set? I guess I would find that very helpful.
I think you should. I think if it's apparent that there's only one item attached, and if there's only one item attached, it must be the complete set. They should be able to add the part complete set for that library.
Well, should, yes, but I think this is something that needs to be considered a cleanup project, and to have, maybe it's going to be me, but somebody with assigned responsibility to do this on behalf of other libraries, and not, I don't want folks just going in there willy-nilly, changing stuff and then changing it back and making more confusion that way.
Well, and I don't think that would be the problem so much. I think just kind of a clear, if you're in a record, like Perry, would you mind looking up the Game of Thrones DVDs?
Sure.
So this was when I was looking at that I was going to go in and add, because I've noticed other libraries circulate the discs, and of course we always do the whole thing. So I was going to add parts, and if you look, other than Sarah's got her box set on everyone, the call number kind of shows they've all done it. Baker, Milton Freewater have done it differently.
Right.
And so if I'm in that record updating my parts, it would be really quick and easy for me to just create part names and assign when it's something like this where it's clear.
Okay, yeah, if it's
and I think that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Beth, could you address if this permission is available to us, does that permission translate to other abilities to edit items of another libraries that we may be concerned about?
I don't think so. I mean, the managed parts permission is separate.
Okay.
Other item permissions.
Perfect.
So I think assigning it to the consortial level would not represent a problem.
So did we have established that we prefer to use complete set rather than box set? That is one of our new standards that we're setting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would vote for that. We're going to change it right now. Yeah, show us. Let's do it right now.
We've also established that the part names need to be descriptive, that they should contain either, discs number A through C or episodes number X, Y, Z, rather than a simple Part 1, Part 2, Volume 1, Volume 2, etc., that is not descriptive of the contents of that part.
Mm-hmm. I think having Volume 1, Volume 2 is fine in there.
No, I'm not saying that
but right, to have the descriptive part also, or just put thought into making it that it's clear what people are getting.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we
want
to
move this along? What if Sarah and I came up with a list and circulated it? I guess I don't want to wait maybe till the next meeting to talk about it again, but if we came up with a list of vocabulary and circulated it to the committee, we could perhaps approve it over email and then send it to the larger group so that people that are already doing this
Sounds fine. I was considering doing something similar myself. I guess I'll look at yours and add my own suggestions when I get it.
Okay, so we'll just put that on my to-do list to get with Sarah, and we'll send something out for everyone to approve on in the next week or two.
That sounds good. Why don't you, this is Sarah, email me and to get started. We'll just, look at that. Okay. Sarah's looking at the example now.
So there's a permissions issue.
And we'll just kind of brainstorm on what those, but I think that's a good idea. We don't have to be hugely micromanaging, but to have some consistency would only help, I would think. So
I think that would help people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you guys for this good discussion. Is there more about parts that people would like to?
I just want clarification on the permission level. Is it okay to assign this to a Cat 2, or does it need to be a Cat 1?
This is Lori, and here I am being restrictive, I guess, in this one, but I would keep it to your highest level catalogers at this point.
You're not concerned about the point?
You can always contact David or.
Okay.
Because it just until we're all familiar with it, and in the next meeting or in 4 months, if we want to review that and loosen up those restrictions, we can do so.
That sounds fine to me.
Does anyone have an idea of how many Cat 1s there are in the system?
Well, it's just basically the mentors.
The mentors.
David and I. Is there anybody else?
I'm kind of hoping I'm Cat 1. This is I'm not a mentor right now. I import a lot of records, so I need to get some training if that's not going to work out. But, no, I think. Yeah. So the mentors, people at the meeting. Are there
a dozen? More than a dozen.
Yeah. It is more than the mentors, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is when I've made when I've added parts for other libraries, when I have had any question as to whether, this is volume whatever, or there's just one attachment and there's no indication, what I'll do is I'll leave that one alone, add to the others, and then I'll usually ship off an email to that library and I'll leave it to them to make that determination. Please check this out, or if you need help, get back to me and let me know, and I'll add it. But I think, we can't get stuck on those things. If there's any doubt. Exactly. And I think to me, and this is how I've looked at it when I've, come across and gone, okay, what am I going to do? There's 30-some holdings, and all except for one, are obvious. Do I mess with that one? My thinking is it's better to put the onerous back on the library that owns it. And, at that point, then for me to try to make some sort of determination and then it be not correct and cause problems later.
Agreed.
That sounds like a policy.
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely want the part that it's assigned to match the actual item. It's centrally important. So if there's any doubt, I think to wait and contact the library is a good idea. So, and I'll do that too.
And I think, this will be a training in progress, because as we enter new items and other libraries come in to attach to them, it will be obvious, and it'll be a training element even for those that haven't had time to start working with these parts. And 6 months from now, it might be old hat for everyone, which would be good.
That's a good point. Right, as we see it more and everyone sees it more, hopefully it'll become, just increase the awareness for everyone who's matching and attaching.
So in this...
The other caution that I have, in these box sets, if we go and just automatically assign box sets, we have some odd items that are like Great Westerns or something, and some of those came in 3 or 4 DVDs. And it seems like some libraries will attach to the complete set even if they don't have all 4 or 5 CD or DVDs. And so that's one area where it might not be good to assign box set to a library. I've run into that, especially.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so you do have to have a little caution there. Not everyone would think to mention that they only have 1 DVD. Some libraries actually go into the bibliographic record and change it, which then affects everyone that has holdings on that item, and that's frustrating. But in reverse, you can't always assume that just because somebody has attached to a DVD bib, they may not have been aware that they only were holding 1 item, or they didn't think it was relevant, so they attach a single item and circulate it as though it was 5 movies.
So I want to make a suggestion using this example here, the Game of Thrones complete second season. There are parts here that have episode 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. I'm not sure if that is what the discs are labeled. So when staff are checking the parts, this what's displayed needs to match what the discs are, so the staff can easily tell that the parts are there.
Well, doesn't each part have to be created by a cataloger?
Yes.
So someone put those in, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that is what is labeled on the disc or whether that's the episodes that are on those discs that may say disc 1, disc 2, disc 3, disc 4.
I don't know if this is what you're getting at. Sometimes, but this is Sarah. Let's see. So that we use, if we're trying to decide on a label, to use a label that's actually on the disc itself and not on the case.
Right.
Or just like in cataloging, defer to what's on the disc. But then, so that because it is true that discs, it seems like the same DVD discs will be packaged in different ways. You can buy them packaged in different ways. On the other hand, it needs to describe what the person is actually getting in a way that's somewhat meaningful.
And if they're going by order, I think...
This one is a confusing example.
Yeah. So we have libraries that are listing them as disc numbers, and then the parts, somebody's put in episodes.
And then the episodes,
so there's
you don't know how to match those up.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of ours
I
are
guess I
checked out.
don't know a solution off of
Well,
stuff I had for this.
We'll continue this further over email, I think, in the
Okay.
to come, and start circulating some recommendations for approved terminology.
Okay, that sounds good. And we'll see how often we come up to this issue of difficulty figuring out what the part is, and what it matches on a physical item. If it's a big issue, a small issue, and if it we'll just kind of work with that and revisit next time too. And we talk with over email. Okay, serial monographs. I'm interested in this. David, would you like to tell us what you've been working on this, or does everybody know what we're talking about on serial monographs?
Well, allow me to sum up.
Okay.
There was a desire expressed by the members of the cataloging committee to simplify the bib records in the database and avoid the risk of duplicate imports, etc., by converting certain classes of bib records into what are called serial monographs, that being defined as a monograph that is reissued serially. For instance, the Guinness Book of World Records, which is updated annually in a new edition. Kelley Blue Book used car guides, which are updated, I think, on the trimester, and also possibly travel guides, Fodor's Rough Guide, Rick Steves. These are also reissued in new editions every year. And the idea was then that we could create a single bibliographic record in the form of a serial, somewhat, using at least the serial fixed fields and certain serial elements, to which then we could attach each new edition of the serial monograph using part names to distinguish what year and so on and so forth. Everyone with me so far?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, I found that aside from the Guinness Book of World Records, which regrettably they have several, call them subject guides. So, there is the Guinness Annual Edition, and I have gone ahead and converted that into a serial monograph. There is then also Guinness Weirdest People, or Guinness Ugliest Animals, or Guinness Frightening Feats, etc., where they have them together by theme or by subject, and those types of Guinness books are not updated annually, so that they're not candidates for this conversion. Also, I found that with the examples I mentioned, travel guides, Kelley Blue Book also, those are already in a very good state of organization. In fact, Kelley Blue Book was already in as a serial when I came across it. So then, if we're going to pursue serial monographs going forward, the next obvious and logical candidate for conversion is manga, aka Japanese comic books. So I've identified close to a dozen titles, Dragon Ball, Yu-Gi-Oh, so on and so forth, that are now in the catalog as monographs, with each volume in the continuing series having its own bib record. If the committee is interested, I can then proceed to convert those into a serial monograph format. As I said, there would be for instance, there would be a single bib record for the Dragon Ball manga with every issue attached, with every volume, I should say, every volume attached, and a part identifying, well, this is volume 1, this is volume 2, so on and so forth.
This is Lori.
Go ahead. No, I just wanted to clarify that the items would be on a part on the record. Is that right?
Yes, because often,
so that people could get the one they wanted.
Yes, often a library might have more than one copy of a particular issue or volume, so it's necessary to distinguish that way. Also then, of course, in this merge process, you will be bringing multiple copies of the same volume held at different libraries, and with the less clear standard for call numbers, then perhaps with DVDs, box sets, yeah, it is necessary to use part names to indicate the volume or issue of these comic books in this process.
This is Lori, and what I'd like to say is I'd like to tier this effort. I agree totally with most of the serials being held under a single bibliographic record with the items clearly showing the year or the issue that's involved. I'm a little more hesitant on the manga, and the reason is because they do contain separate content notes often. They contain separate summaries. They have separate plots. They're quite different. And in our library alone, I can think of 15 to 20 different sets that would have to be so merged. And I don't know why exactly, but I'm not comfortable with putting those under a serial single bib. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I'm seeing some problem, and I'm not sure. But certainly, couldn't we tackle the regular serial work with, travel journals or car repair kits or anything that would typically be addressed as a serial, and then address the manga at a later date?
Yeah, I think we've addressed most of the serial monographs that we've been able to identify. If you have other suggestions, but we can hold off on the manga if there's some hesitation.
Yeah.
Well, I would hesitate with the manga too, and it's because to me in my head, and I know they're less than a book, but if you think about a book series, any book series that your patrons are reading, that individual summary information is what they rely on to know, okay, I already read that issue. I read that Alex Cross, which is the one I'm missing, and they look at that content, and with manga, the content is different per issue. Just I see them as very similar. So I think
right, and they often have
that all
illustrators and some of the other contributors.
Yeah, and I think combining that all into one bib would be, you'd either have to lose all of that information, which I think our patrons would find relevant, or it would be a massive bib that would be too bulky to weed through and figure out which issue you were looking for.
Yeah, you'd have to have multiple content notes. It would be pretty bulky.
It would be, be horrible, I feel like.
Okay.
Okay.
So, but do you think that we could put out, since you're working on this project anyway, do you think we could put out a call to libraries for those serial publications that they might be able to merge? Because I could probably think of 10 off the top of my head that we don't have merged that could be here.
Okay. Well, the travel guides, that was one suggestion that I had heard, but like I said, in searching the catalog, there doesn't really seem to be enough overlap of different editions so that you would have, let's say, the rough guide to China, and then have libraries holding multiple years of that same title. That doesn't seem to be the case. So I'm assuming then that libraries are being pretty good about weeding out their travel books as new ones come in and not holding, 5 or 6 or 7 different editions from 2001 and 2002 and 2003 and so on and so forth. But yeah, if there are, if you guys have other suggestions, let me hear them. Just shoot me an email and I'll check it out.
Okay, that sounds good. I have a couple.
I'm wondering too, would it be possible at some point to put out like a list or even just a informational thing that we have done this to, say, the cataloging listserv, so that they're aware that
yes,
even if we list some of the titles, just so that they're aware that when when a year down the road something comes across their desk and they go, it seems like there was something about this title that I need to be aware of.
Yeah, yes. When we were discussing when we were discussing this last month over the cataloging listserv, I did in fact send out an email back to the listserv saying that I had done the Guinness Book of Records as sort of a sample of the marked format I intended to use going forward. I've not converted any others over to serial monograph yet, but as I do, I will be sure to let the committee know that those changes have occurred.
Well, I'm thinking not so much just the committee, which ones, but when we've finished up a chunk, say we figured we've done the majority of, could we send out a list of titles that we've found this to be an issue with and that we've since consolidated into the serial monographs, more or less, so that they're aware, that we are doing this with folders and we're doing them with, this one and this one and this one, just so that they're aware that this is going on, so that they don't just automatically go, oh, I don't see mine, and I'm going to go grab the record. Because I think what has happened sometimes with this in the past is when we don't keep it kind of somewhat out there, we do this background work, but if we don't communicate that it's happened, then sometimes it kind of starts sliding again. And then you have to come back a year or two later and you have to consolidate and clean up. I know this has happened with, for instance, the Oregon Blue Book. And when I did training, I think it was in 2012, we came across a bunch when we were doing the training that they needed to be fixed. And I have gone back and fixed them, and I've seen them slipping and sliding again. And that was one that I continually mentioned during the training, so a number of people were aware of. But it's, again, we see it sliding again. So that's why I asked. Could we just kind of put a consolidated list?
Okay, point taken.
That's a good idea. And actually,
this is Lori. I think there's just a little confusion. David, I think you sometimes refer to any emails on the SAGE CAT list, so it's out to the cataloging committee. And really, it's supposed to be every library that is doing any cataloging. They aren't all.
Yes, and yet it doesn't seem to be reaching many of them, does it, Lori?
They just don't talk like some of us.
No, this is Sarah. I have, related to that, thinking about it, I mean, perhaps even the whole SAGE listserv, it might be worthwhile to inform everyone because it affects
what I understood
people who are on the front desk, is that what you're saying? Okay, good, yeah. I mean, even people who don't catalog and aren't making a decision how to add next year's volume, but people who are helping their patrons, it might make a difference if they're used to looking for the travel guides in a certain way, and now they're listed on serial records. That it will just be different to them. So
I'm not sure that the conversion will affect the patrons' search process too much. It'll more affect how new items are added, but. Yes, I think that we will need to make sure to email not just the cataloging listserv, but the all member libraries listserv with news concerning this process in particular.
Right. Okay, sounds good. So we will let you know about other serial monographs that we think could be or should be looked at for consolidation, or monographs looked at for consolidation to serial records.
Yes.
And that sounds good, and you'll work on a list. Thank you, David. So for series display, naming conventions, actually, Lori, do you want to talk about this, or do we want to go into detail? We could also send an email reminding people, but it sounds like that SAGE, the work has been done on this and deciding ways, and as we are have a series display now, it sounded like it's a good time to remind people of how to input series so that they display as clearly as possible. Is that correct?
This is Lori, and I think that's mostly what that would pertain to. I think it's also related to what Dia has said about initiating an idea and really bringing it to the forefront, and we think everybody's on the same page, and we assume everyone uses our cataloging manual, which is not true. And so we think we have a policy and a practice in place, and then we start sliding. And what I noticed with series a lot is that different terminology, different spellings even, of sometimes just spelling errors or just spelling mistakes. But recently also, I don't know why, Beth, I think I emailed you and said that I think we've reverted back to displaying from the 490 field, and it seems still to be the case, which will affect our series display. We can have a really nice display with ascending order on our series titles if everyone checks and makes sure that they're using exactly the same terminology in their series titles and they're numbering in the same format. And so if we're displaying off of the 8XX field, theoretically, the numbers would be a 2-digit number at all times, a 0 preceding anything up to number 9. And if the terminology is the same, they would display nicely. But out of the 490 field, that isn't possible as I see it. So can anybody else explain to me displaying from the 490, the 8XX, and how do we get people to use good terminology, even though we don't have authority control over a lot of these series because they're introduced series titles? We should be able to have that own control within our system if trained catalogers know to go back and look at the series that pre-exists the one in hand.
Well, Lori, this is Sarah. I've been trying to do a lot more extensive series work as I bring books in, and looking back, and including looking back at previous books from the series to find out what has been named in SAGE, and it's rarely clear. There's just enough diversity. So I would prefer to kind of restate those standards. And looking in the manual right now, perhaps we could just sum it up really fast that we avoid using, well, obviously avoid initial articles. We avoid things like mysteries or trilogy. You don't want those kind of words in the series statement. Is that correct? I mean, are there other kind of guidelines like that of what we use? Obviously, some of it won't come out because it's simply authoritative, like the name of the series has changed since over time. The author is using a different term or whatever. But does this make sense? Like, I think to have the guidelines restated would be nice because it's hard to tell from previous. There's been enough inconsistency over time that it can be hard to tell.
Yeah, and hey, this is David. Actually, yes, series titles and naming conventions are one of the topics that I am going to be addressing in seminars for people who've already mastered the basics of MARC through the Nebraska training.
Mm-hmm.
And
okay.
I'll reiterate that is not just the recent the people that I am training now, or even the 2012-2013 class that did Nebraska, but this is going to be open and participation encouraged from all the folks who are working at this level in this, the consortium.
Okay, so that sounds good. In the meantime, I guess if we have any questions, we'll just refer to read through the cataloging, the standards manual again, and wait for that class. I think that will be helpful.
And this is Lori. Can anybody tell me the pros and cons of displaying from the 490 or the 8XX? I don't know. Beth, do you know why we reverted? For a while it was displaying from the 8XX. It reverted, and I don't know why.
It should still be displaying from the 8XX. I didn't make any changes, and Lori, I'm going to check out all those examples you gave me and see what's going on. And
I checked again this morning, and it is displaying from the 490.
Okay, which page are you looking at, Lori? Are you looking at the result page, or are you looking at the detail page?
Well, I've done it several ways. I'll look for the series by series title, and I can tell right there that it's searching from the 490 because it includes things like book and volume in front of the number, which only happens in the, and then I go into the record and I can see that's only entered in the 490. So it's not a clear numerical display.
The results page is currently displaying the 490, but the detail page is displaying the 490, and I've got it in the works to change that, but the coding is complex. But the results page is displaying the 8XX, and also the indexes, the series entries are coming from the 8XX as well.
So when I do a series search by title, why am I getting all of the returns as it has both the series terminology from the 490 and the number from the 490? What am I doing wrong? What would a patron see then?
Well, I guess I'm confused at what you're saying when you said you do a series search. So I think you and I are going to have to maybe look at some screenshots together and so that I have a better understanding of what's not happening right. Because it's kind of hard from conversation to know exactly what you're seeing.
Sounds like she's referring to the suggested search things that are popping up, and that would be from an index. Would the index have information from both fields?
It
no longer has it from both. For a while it was both, and then it was down to just the 8XX, and now it's back to the 490.
So you're talking about the drop-down box that has suggestions?
Well, we'll go over this on the phone, or if you just look at the items I sent you. So I just went onto the OPAC as though I were a patron, and I searched for 39 clues. And everything that's coming back on that display is displaying to the patron from the 490 field. So they will never have a true hierarchy in the number. And if articles are included, some of those will be under the, and some will be under 39 clues. They'll have a different display order as a result, because there are articles in the 490s. So we'll get on the phone, or you could look at the examples I sent you in the email last week and tell me what's happening here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. David, is there anything else that you would like to tell us about during the meeting?
No, not particularly. I see here, do I have any other concerns? No, I think things are proceeding fairly well.
Okay. Would you and Beth tell us what cleanup projects you're working on, if any? What's going on in that area? I know it came up a little bit, but
which is just getting underway.
Yeah.
I'm in doing this and in doing also the large print cleanup. I occasionally come across duplicates and other things. well, I don't know. I'll just mention this. But one thing that I have noticed here in doing the current veil cleanup project, and also in doing the large print bib cleanup that we did earlier, is a certain issue surrounding out-of-copyright works that have been issued in many, many editions. Example, I don't know, pick any classic. Dracula, Treasure Island, Around the World in 80 Days. I'm noticing a fair number of bib records for titles like these that, if you were to take them at face value, would indicate that we are circulating a number of 100 and 150-year-old first edition copies of these titles, which seems unlikely in the extreme. So that's also, I think, something else that I intend to touch on in some cataloging seminars here, is differences between dates of copyright and publication and how those should be properly expressed in the record.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that sounds like a good thing to go over at some point in the future, perhaps one of your a training or even a tip of the week or whatever, that because yeah, if you're seeing a lot of issues with it, then we should talk it through.
Well, I'm not seeing a lot of issues. I think it's simply these are ones that date back a considerable time, and just poor selection of records from an approved source.
Okay.
You know, if you take the first one available, that one may be what these are, which is a stub description of a first edition from LOC or WorldCat, and probably not actually an accurate description of the item in hand, unless, of course, it happens to be a reproduction edition. But then, well, anyway, it's something that I'll be talking about with other folks more at a later date.
Okay, that sounds good.
And you're right, that would make a good cataloging tip of the week, as a matter of fact. I'll keep that one in mind for future use.
Okay. Is there anything else people feel that we should address this meeting? Okay. I'll suggest that we adjourn. Dia, thank you for taking notes. And our next meeting, do we want to meet in 1 month or back to our standard every 2 months? So do we want a March or April meeting as the next one? No one has a strong opinion about this, huh?
I don't.
Well, I was just going to say, this is Dia, that if we have this long of an agenda, then if we spoke it over, a couple of months, it might be easier.
Okay.
I don't know. I just know that sometimes, our meetings run really long, and sometimes they're like an hour, and it's hard to know how to plan around. That's just a thought that I've just come up with, so I throw it out there.
No, that's a good thought. I have put zero energy into trying to make meetings a consistent length. We could do that, especially I think if the meetings were more often and we didn't have to address everything every time. To me, that would be kind of an option, or we can continue on as we've gone. I'm not. I don't have the most. In terms of coming up with the agendas, it's pretty, I wouldn't say quite arbitrary, but I'm very open to people's suggestions. So I'm open to doing it however.
Yeah, all the more reason to go with more often and shorter, I would say.
Okay. Okay. So March, should we? The first Monday in March would be March 2nd. Should we plan on that?
Okay.
That sounds good.
March 2nd.
I think it's a good idea.
Budget 2 hours, just in case.
Yeah, just in case. We'll try for one.
1.5.
I'll think more about 1.5. That's maybe more realistic. Topics that come up but could be deferred. I'll think about that more as I'm putting the agenda together too. Thank you all for your patience and engaging so much on these issues. It's really it feels helpful to me.
I'm wondering if one of the things that we could do to shorten the meetings is for some of the things that just require updates. Maybe David and I could publish something ahead of time to the group, and then if there's questions, fine. If not, the information is out there without having to maybe spend a lot of time discussing it.
It's a great idea.
That sounds really helpful.
Yeah, I would be happy with that too.
And I think
Yeah,
that
that
at
would be
the
great.
Baker meeting you did say that possibly you could start giving a monthly report on the work that you and David are doing, just so we kind of know, I guess, what's happening. And then if we see cleanup ourselves, or suggestions or have questions about what's happening, we could contact you directly to avoid some of it.
Okay.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Sounds good.
So this
thank you all.
meeting has been recording. Would you like me to post that on the Sage Wiki as I've been doing with the user council meetings?
Yes.
Okay. I can get that done by tomorrow.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Perry.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. It's
All right.
12:59 for the recording purposes.
Okay. Just under. It wasn't 2 hours. Not quite.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned. Bye-bye.